start off as an infant being dependent, and you grow into adulthood and you're independent. And at least now, with people living so long and with people no longer living in an extended family, you become much more dependent on outside help. So it was difficult to see them need to be put in a facility, assisted living, and ultimately a nursing home. My father was born in 1918. He was the son of immigrants from the Ukraine who came through Ellis Island. By the time he reached the age of 11, the Great Depression had begun in 1929, and he started working. And he worked his entire life from 11 years old on. But then in his late 70s, early 80s, he started showing typical signs of dementia, which included hoarding of food, and not surprising since he was hungry in the Depression and then had been in the food business all his life. So that was an early sign.
So there are 30 kinds of dementias. So Alzheimer's is one dementia. There are many kinds of dementias. Acute depression is one of them. Sometimes patients can be delirious. Psychosis, neurosis. One of the examples of psychosis is schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, and so on. These would be probably some typical ones.
As my dad grew, as he became more diminished by Alzheimer's, it became more difficult for my mother to cope with him. Finally, he lost his driver's license and she had to drive him everywhere, which was a great burden. At the end, she moved out with my father to Los Angeles, and they both entered assisted living. She, to this day, is not happy and is still planning her escape.
We've had 4 of them with round-the-clock help, and it isn't fun.
First was my mother, who lived with us for 13 years, and then she ended up in a nursing home. She had a massive stroke. People really need to understand that the first overnight that she was there, they stole half her clothes. You had to be there at different times because you didn't know whether or not, if they're incontinent, if they are being cleaned and taken care of. It's sad.
It's frightening, and people don't realize it.
Right.
But you have to be there all the time. Someone has to be there at minimum once a week, preferably once a day.
First of all, these patients need to be very, very well evaluated. They need to be under a proper medication regime. They need to be in a very supportive environment where the families are able to provide them with their medications. They are safe. They're not self-destructive. So this poses the greatest challenge among my patients because they need to be really supervised and monitored.
My dad was actually in very good physical health, except I should mention he had gout, which is not much of an issue. But unfortunately, they gave him the wrong medication in assisted living at Sunrise for his gout, and that put him in a renal failure, which he never recovered, and that was also one of the contributing factors to his death.
If you need someone and you can't take care of yourself, being in your own home is far superior to being in a nursing home. It's very expensive. We were very fortunate with the 3 we had that they had a lot of money and could afford it, because it's really expensive. But the difference between a convalescent home and being in your own home is just night and day.
I think planning for that income, planning for that affordability becomes the most viable option. Sometimes I tell patients to buy long-term care insurance, make sure that they plan it well, they take a reverse mortgage or whatever it is. But clearly it is all about being able to take care of somebody at home or not, and sometimes it comes down to a financial issue.
But caring for somebody when you live with them on a daily basis is very, very exhausting.
I think first of all you have to be very compassionate, you have to be very caring. I literally try to place myself in the shoes of the caregiver or the adult child, because I personally came into this because of my parents. So I think you really need to be very, very patient, compassionate, and tolerant.
When they're older, they still want to do things the way they want to do them, even though they can't. And so it's very difficult, very frustrating for them. Then in turn, very frustrating, puts a great strain, on us. And it gets to the point where you can't leave them alone for fear something will happen. Will they set the house on fire? Will they get lost? Will they fall?
One question we'll never be able to answer, which causes great regret, is whether they would have done better if we had left them on the East Coast in their situation and maybe got help in there instead of bringing them out, which in many ways was better for us because we're closer, but we'll never know if it was truly better for them.
There was nothing we could do. That's literally was our job.
Was our job, was our life.
It was our life.
And when you're on call 24 hours a day, when the phone rings,
To this day, if the phone rings, I jump.
it's
You're like
horrible.
Pavlov's dog. You just get conditioned.
My dad, on the other hand, went to a memory unit or an Alzheimer's unit, and he had a very difficult time. He was constantly trying to escape. He eventually, as I said, became agitated and saw himself back in the jungle in one of the Pacific Islands during World War II. Unfortunately, many of his caregivers were Asian, and for him in his demented state, he was unable to really understand they were caregivers and saw them as, back in World War II, he saw them as the enemy and started becoming aggressive and threatening. And so to try to stop that behavior, the psychologist tried to gently push up his sedatives, various classes of drugs that you try to use, but problem is that nothing really works well. None of the classes of atypical antipsychotics, sedatives, and so on really work for Alzheimer's. There is no medication. And so all they could do was sedate him until finally they sedated him too much.
You as a caregiver or an adult child or a grandchild have to be the advocate, because all these skilled nursing facilities, they are very, very overcrowded. They are run by people who don't make much of an income, so they need assistance. And I think that you have to be really watching.
But would we have done it any differently? No.
No,
Because they
you can't
needed
do
us.
that. They needed us.
Sure.
Transitions for elderly people are difficult, and for people with Alzheimer's are even more difficult. And we'll always have regrets and reflections about whether we accelerated his dementia and his demise by bringing him out here. It's something that we will never know.